We're going to take things nice and slow this time around with a slow-cooking, savory venison stew, and we'll be making deliciously menacing meat pie straight out of a penny dreadful with the leftovers on this episode of...
So on this episode, we're going to be making Raven Stag stew, which is a slow-simmering stew made with venison, root vegetables, dark fruit, and juniper berries, which I know are what you use to make gin, which is also why this recipe calls for a shot of gin, but apparently is a common food for wild game such as deer, and is therefore a staple when it comes to venison recipes. But I've actually never used it or even seen it in a store before, so it might be a little tougher to find. But no matter how far, no matter how treacherous the path, no matter what obstacles lay before me, may the furies of hell itself bear down upon me, I shall never... Actually, they probably have them at Mariano's or something. But that's not all. We're also going to be making dearly beloved meat pies with the leftovers of our stew, and we'll be making the lemon olive oil pastry as our pie crust. Now, these are recipes that don't actually exist anywhere in the show, but are a representation of all the stag-like creatures that appear in much of the first two seasons, and in effect set a very specific tone of images for the rest of the show. But more of that later. Let's head to the store.
Alright, here we are on our way to Mariano's in Orland Park to locate dried juniper berries. And we'll be getting everything else that we need while we're out. It's a very dreary day today. Probably don't need sunglasses, but I'm probably gonna wear them anyway. Okay, so we're doing a meat pie episode from a cannibal TV show cookbook, and I turn on my phone, and I kid you not, this is the first song that comes on. It's man devouring man, my dear, and who are we to deny it in here? Here we go. Heading straight to the spices to see if they have juniper berries or not. Now we just need to get everything else. So while he does the rest of the shopping, what is a Raven Stag anyway? As its name would suggest, the Raven Stag is a creature representing a large ebony stag with sleek raven's feathers that the show's main protagonist, Will Graham, often sees in his dreams or hallucinations.
What's happening to me?
Well, Will isn't well. The image was born from the first tableau we ever see left by Hannibal on the show, a young girl impaled on a stag head, being picked at by ravens, and was in fact a sort of gift to Will.
That crime scene was practically gift-wrapped.
As a way to indirectly help him find the killer that he seeks, a man called Garrett Jacob Hobbs.
I think I can help Goodwill see his face.
The Raven Stag is representative of Will's journey to find the killer, who is really Hannibal, but also Will and Hannibal's bond. The Raven Stag can be seen in his head stalking down hallways, leading Will somewhere he needs to go, seemingly watching over Will or constantly following him, or even bleeding out and dying when their bond is broken. The Raven Stag is a really well done animation, especially for a network TV show, and is an eerie yet beautiful creature that definitely deserves a recipe or two. And now, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Well, we got everything we needed here at Mariano's, so I guess we can just head on home.
We're going home, but before we go, here's a few more parting shots.
So we start this recipe off with venison stew meat, and the recipe calls for 2 pounds, but I'm actually going to make a double batch so we have plenty left over for the pies. So we're going to need 4 pounds. In a large mixing bowl, add 2/3 of a cup of flour and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, and whisk those together to combine. Add your venison to this and toss it well until all the pieces are evenly coated with the flour. Heat some olive oil in the bottom of a large stew pot or Dutch oven pot and add your floured pieces of venison and cook them in batches, turning them until lightly browned on all sides. And when they're done, just put them in their own little bowl and set aside. In between your batches, deglaze the bottom of the pan with a little olive oil and scrape all those flavorful crispy bits from the pot and set aside for later.
Now that our meat is all done, add your onions, about a cup, and scrape the bottom to get even more crispy bits. Add all your crispy bits from before, and cook those down just slightly until they're a little bit translucent and slightly caramelized. Go ahead and add your carrots and your parsnips, and cook them down too. Only slightly. We just want to get a little caramelization going. Now add about 3 cups of water to the pot and stir and scrape the bottom of the pan to deglaze and essentially make a kind of broth. Now add your venison pieces to that and get them as even as you can in the water. Now we're going to go ahead and cover that and let it come to a boil, stirring periodically as the sauce thickens. Now we can add back our par-cooked vegetables and the rest of our ingredients. 2 cups of red wine, 2/3 of a cup of chopped dried pitted prunes, say that 5 times fast, a shot of gin, 2 teaspoons of beef stock concentrate, I used better than bouillon, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano leaves, and finally 2 tablespoons of the infamous dried juniper berries. And give that a healthy dose of ground pepper and kosher salt, and give that a good stir to combine. Loving how this is looking already. Now we're going to let that simmer very gently on a low heat, uncovered for about 3 hours. Now while that's stewing, we're going to get together the mashed potatoes that we're going to serve underneath our stew. So scrub and rinse some red potatoes, how many ever you'll need, and go ahead and dice those into small, sensible chunks. And we're going to add that to some boiling water and let them cook. Now my recipe for these mashed potatoes includes some roasted garlic, which she actually has the common recipe for in her book, so there's another one off the list. Woohoo! Cut off the top of a whole bulb of garlic, and then drizzle it with olive oil, getting it all in there in the nooks and crannies. Then sprinkle with a little bit of salt and just a little bit of pepper. Then place that in a 375-degree oven for about 40 minutes or until the garlic is fork tender and lightly browned. Since we are working with gin, I say we make a martini, eh, Nora?
Always have rhythm in your shake. On a Manhattan, you shake to foxtrot time. A Bronx, to two-step time. The dry martini, you always shake to waltz time.
Okay, now try and regain your balance and check that the potatoes are fork tender. Then drain the water and return the pot to the stove. To that, add a stick of butter cut into pieces, a 1/4 cup of heavy cream, about a 1/2 cup of sour cream, and my secret for mashed potatoes, just a few tablespoons of mayonnaise for a little tang. Now add some finely ground rosemary and some fresh ground sage, and give them a good mashing. And don't forget to give them the old salt and pepper treatment. Once your garlic is out of the oven and your house smells amazing, go ahead and let that cool, and then peel away the skin and extract all the gooey goodness. Give them a fine chopping, and then go ahead and add them to the potatoes and fold in with a spatula. This is my go-to mashed potato recipe, and she's never let me down before. As your stew is cooking, make sure to give it a good periodic stir now and then, and also make sure that you're scraping the bottom as well. Your stew should only simmer very lightly with bubbles gently breaking on the surface. Once the stew is thickened beautifully and your kitchen smells like an English hunting lodge, we are ready for dinner.
In a bowl, combine an egg yolk, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, a 1/4 cup of chilled white wine, and a 1/4 teaspoon of grated lemon zest, and whisk that together until well combined. And put that into the refrigerator until later. In another larger bowl, add 2 cups of flour and a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt, and whisk that to combine. Add to your flour a 1/2 cup of cold unsalted butter cut into small cubes, and using either a pastry blender or 2 forks, cut the butter into the flour until the mixture is crumbly. Then to that, add your egg mixture and toss together to combine until it begins to come together. Then lightly flour your hands and squeeze your mixture together until it comes together into a dough. Then put that on a lightly floured surface and knead gently until the dough is smooth and soft, but not sticky. Cut that in half and shape into 2 balls, then flatten slightly and wrap in plastic wrap. Then place in the refrigerator and let those sit for at least 1 hour. Once they're ready, go ahead and cut those into quarters and roll them flat with a rolling pin. Now you can make these pies in most any oven-proof dish, so I made these in 4 individual ceramic ramekins. Line your ramekins with a sheet of pastry, pressing to get it even and to get the pie crust hanging over the edges. Now take your cold leftover stew and fill your pie shell, making sure to mound the filling slightly in the middle. Now lay another sheet of rolled pastry over the top and trim off the excess with some poultry shears. Now we're going to use a simple and classic crimping method using a fork and making sure to press all the way around twice. Now cut 3 slits to allow the pie to vent. Now arrange your pies on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper or aluminum foil and give them a brush of egg wash. Now place those into a 400-degree oven for 10 minutes. Then reduce the temperature to 350 degrees and bake for another 20 minutes until the pastry is golden brown and the filling is heated through. Now that the pies are out of the oven, we are ready for dinner. Again. So grab your penny dreadful and let's eat. And there we have it, another 3 recipes off the list. This stew has a lot going for it flavor-wise, and I really like the practical use of using the leftovers for something like meat pies. In the future though, I might just make the change to crush the juniper berries or put them whole in sort of a small filtered cloth baggie, something similar to what you do when you make apple cider, because when you bit into the juniper berries in the stew, they kind of exploded with this sudden sting of bitterness, which all in all was a good flavor to have. Unfortunately, having them burst all of a sudden in your mouth was just a little unbearable. Or should I say, unbearable. Guys, so alone. So that's it for this episode of Hannibal and I. I'm Cody Marchakaitis. Always remember to stay courteous, and I will see you in the kitchen next time. Ducky.